Hi, I'm Terry, and in this guide, we'll explore how to enhance your business applications using drag and drop components and effectively leverage the events tool. Throughout this guide, we'll create two simple applications to showcase Neptune DXP's drag and drop capabilities while demonstrating how the events tool can enhance the interactivity and responsiveness of your applications. But before we start, let's explain first what events are in Open Edition. With the Events tool, you can create triggers that initiate a range of actions, such as running jobs, server scripts, or specific actions within applications. This not only streamlines processes, but also automates actions, ensuring data consistency across all applications without the need for manual synchronization. It's important to know that utilizing the Events tool requires access to an Open Edition module and a connection to a Redis server. Let's now have a quick overview of the two applications. Our first application consists of two panels, the development panel and the production panel. Users can easily drag and drop items between these panels. When an item is dropped into the production panel, it triggers an event that initiates a chain of actions. We've also added a trash bin area where items from the development panel can be discarded. Whereas in the second application, we showcase techniques for arranging drag and drop components. Regarding our events, let's see now how they will work in the background. When a user moves an item from the development panel to the production panel, an event executes a script along with data for processing. In this script, we can process the data and take various actions based on our requirements. In our example, we'll send out an email and trigger another event directly connected to our application. This event allows us to pass desired information from the script back to our application. So let's now start with the first application. We have here a simple application with two panels. Each panel contains the same components, and we'll be working with the drop info component and drag info component. We have here some items that we can see. This data is located here. We have an object containing two arrays, the development items and the production items. Right now, the production items, as you can see, is empty since we're beginning with all our items in the development panel. And then we set this data in our multi-model over here. The source is set as a generic array. And since we're working with grid lists and grid list items, we'll bind the model path to the correct path. So data model, development items, and in the production panel, we can see that it is data model production items. So starting with the drag info, we have here two events, drag start and drag end. Drag start will trigger once we pick up an item, and drag end will initiate once we release the item at any given time. Let's see this in action. So we can see the start and we can see the end. The drop info component has also three events. Drag enter, this will trigger once we enter the drop zone. Drag over, this will trigger once we are hovering the drop zone, and drop will trigger once we successfully drop the item in the drop zone. As we can see, we have here some logic. We will log the data that is binded on the grid list item, and here this is the event that will trigger once we release the item. We'll come back to this later once we define first our events. So let's see these three events in action. As we can see, start, and then we've entered the drop area. As we can see, the hovering drop area, the number is increasing since we are hovering the drop zone and we haven't released. And once we release, we have here the data and the message end. Now let's continue with the properties. We won't explain in this section the drop layout and drop position, since this will come in handy in our second application where the arrangement and the order of the items within our grid list matters. So, with our drag info component, the source aggregation is the name of the aggregation from which all the controls are dragged. This means that if we had a table and we were dragging columns, then the value would be columns. Since we are working with a grid list and we're dragging items, the value is items. If I remove this value and save and activate, we'll see that once we pick up an item from the drag area, we'll actually pick up all the items. So let's put this back. Same for the target aggregation. This is the name of the aggregation where all the drag controls will be dropped and inserted during the drag and drop operations. In this example, we don't have to specify it, but in our second application, we'll have to specify it. Regarding the group name serves as a marker or identifier for a specific set of drag and drop operations. It allows you to create different groups of drag sources and drop targets that are independent of each other. In our example, we are picking up items from the development panel. So that means once we pick up an item, the items that we pick up belong in the group dev items. And if we want to drop them in certain drop zones, so for example, in the production panel and in the trash bin area, then both drop components will have to have the same value as the drag info component at the property group name. So as we can see here, the group name is dev items. Same for the trash bin, dev items. And if we specify again the group name in the drop area of the development panel, we can also allow items to move from production to development. So if we go to the drag info component of the production panel, we can see here it has the value prod items, and in the drop info component under the development panel, we have prod items. So in this way, we can drop items from one panel to another. However, we won't be able to drop items back to the same panel, thus not triggering any events. And lastly, let's show the drop effect. At the moment, we have this effect, this icon right under our pointer. It is a green plus sign. That is because under our production panel, in the drop info component, we have the value copy. If we change this to link, we'll have a different icon. This changes back to copy. And this is mostly it regarding the events and properties for each drag and drop component. Now we'll continue on defining the events to complete this application. And in our second application, we'll see how to arrange the items within a grid list. Before we create our two events, it is more convenient to start by defining the script that will be triggered by one of the events. So let's define the script. As mentioned before, we can pass desired information from the application to the script. This information is stored in the variable payload. We'll use the name and the note, which is stored in the variable payload, to send out an email, which is here. You can find this part of the code and this part of the code if you right click on the script, go to code snippets, under functions, and under send email, you can find the snippets. And for the events, to trigger the events, it is located under P9 events publish. Next, we'll enter the template ID of an email that awaits the variable's name and note, and then trigger the event that will send this message and execute the logic that will be defined in the app later. As you can see here, this name is the name of the event that we will use. Thus, we must use the same name when we define the event connected to the app. Now that we have the script ready, let's proceed to define the two events. As you can see here, these events are already created, so all you need to do is to define them as shown. We'll first create the event which is connected to the app and triggered within the script. So we enter the name that was specified in the script, and select app as the event action. Whereas with the second event, we select script at the event action and the script that was defined before. Having now our two events ready, we can continue on completing the application. We'll search for events in the component library, and we'll use the event listener and the event trigger in our application. The event trigger will be binded to the script event, and the event listener will be binded to the app event that we have just defined. So, as we remember, to trigger this whole pipeline, we need to first drop an item in the production panel. So in the drop event, we'll have to trigger the event trigger. And by doing that, we'll initialize the whole process. To do this, we get the event of the event trigger. So in our case, it's just event trigger. And we place in front trigger. As we remember, our script is waiting for some necessary values, so we pass them here. And we also remember that in the script, we trigger this event, the app listener event. And once that is done, the action will be initialized. And to capture the data that is sent from the script to the application, we just do data. Since our message is only a string, we just have to do data, and we'll display the message in a message source. So let's see this in action. As we can see, the email has been sent. Finally, we proceed with the last app in order to show how to arrange drag and drop items, utilizing this time the drag drop info component. As you can see, this app is very similar to what we created before. However, we only have one panel this time, one drag and drop component, and no events, since we want to focus on how to arrange the items within, in this case, our grid list. So right now we can pick up items and drop them between the items. If we want to drop items on other items and switch them places, we basically have to change the drop position from between to on. So let's see this in action. We can also have both ways. The source aggregation and target aggregation is set to items, since we are working with a grid list and we are picking up items and dropping items within the grid list. And now what is left to do is to implement the logic. As we said, the array is this, div items, which we set to this multi-model. Our drop event is this, and as we can see here, we receive the drag and drop controls and their binding context. After, we get the data objects associated with them. Over here, we determine the indices of the drag and drop data objects in the array. And here, we use the function arrange array to move the dragged item to the new position defined by the dropped item within the array. And lastly, we will have to refresh to update the UI with the new order. The arranged array can be found here. And it will take the array, the starting position, and the ending position, and will arrange the array.